Recording? Recording in progress. Good morning, everybody. So today is Daf Mem Bays. My understanding is that we did get up to the top line, but if it's okay with everyone, relatively short block, we're going to start, back 3 lines from the bottom on Mem Aleph Amud Bays, a new sugya. Okay. So again, we are maybe 4 lines up from the bottom, Mem Aleph Amud Bays. Shlosha lekuchos mitzarfin. So the Gemara says that we are all familiar at this point with the Chazkas Gimel Shanim. Chazkas Gimel Shanim doesn't necessarily need to be made up of a single person. You can have a situation where, let's say, Reuven was the Marakama. Reuven at one point owned this property. He has a raya that he owned this property. He sells it to Shimon. Shimon lives there for a year. Shimon sells it to Levi. Levi lives there for a year. Levi sells it to Yehuda. Yehuda's been there for a year now. And Reuven comes to Yehuda, and Reuven says, hey, what are you doing on my field? Now, Yehuda's only been there a year. Yehuda has a star. Yehuda says, I bought it from Levi, but that doesn't help, right? Reuven's like, well, why does Levi have it? So long as Yehuda, is that the name, can generally prove that it's been 3 years since Reuven sold it to Shimon, Shimon doesn't need to have the star anymore. Because Shimon's like, I don't know, this whole thing happened 3 years ago. I had a star, but I lost it. Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda, all of them being on the field for a year.
Where are you holding? Where are you holding? Please.
Hi, Yigal. Good morning. We are about 4 lines from the bottom of Mem Aleph Amud Beis.
Okay, thanks.
So long as the 3 of them, their chazakas, their individual chazakas, can combine to create a chazkas gimel shan. But Amar Rav said this is only true the kulam b'shtar. That's only true if Reuven sold it to Shimon with a star, and Shimon sold it to Levi with a star, and Levi sold it with a star. The point being that when the fields are sold with star, that creates a certain kol. That puts Reuven, the Marakama, on notice, and therefore he should have made a mecha. Bottom line, what Reuven, the response speaks out, exactly. The response speaks out, what's Reuven's claim? Like, why didn't Reuven make a mecha in these 3 years? Right? Reuven is generally saying, listen, I didn't think I needed to make a mecha because everyone kept selling the property. No one was willing to sit there no one was confident enough to sit there in the land because they knew it was mine. So I never felt that I needed to make a mecha. But the point is, Rav says that each of them, their individual 1-year chazakas can contribute so long as the sale was done with a star. But the Gemara says, Lameimra, the Savar Rav, star is like kala, ve'edin less lo kala. It sounds like what Rav is saying is that if the fields were sold with a star, that creates a kol. That puts Reuven on notice that people are selling, his property. But if they were only sold by Edim, that wouldn't create the same kol. Amar Rav, but Rav said, there's a memra of Rav, says, Hamochar sada be'edim, gova menuchasim mishubadim, that the case over there would be, let's say someone bought a field, and he bought a field, and then he bought a field with a chrayas, right? So Reuven sells a field to Shimon. Reuven says to Shimon, if anyone ever takes your field, that I'm standing behind my guarantee, I will pay you back. Sure enough, someone does come and Sure enough, someone does come and take the field. So Shimon now comes back and he needs to get reimbursed from Reuven. The problem is, in the meantime, Reuven doesn't have any more money because other people have come and they've bought stuff from Reuven. Shimon can now come back to those buyers and get the money back. But Rav says this is even true even if Reuven, the initial sale from Reuven to Shimon, wasn't done with a star. Now, I don't understand. All of these future buyers who bought stuff from Reuven, shouldn't they have the ability to say, wait 1 second, if this initial sale was done with a star, that would have created a call. I would have known that Reuven sold a field to Shimon with a price. I should be put on notice that I should be careful when I buy stuff from Reuven. But if it wasn't done with a star, if it was only done with Aiden, and it doesn't create the same call, then why is it that Shimon is allowed to collect his debt from future buyers of Reuven's field? It sounds like even if you sell only with Aiden, that also creates a call. Right, so why does Rav say in our sugya that when it comes to the chazkas gimel shanim, you're only going to have a chazaka gimel shanim if all of the sales were done with a star? The mashmos is that if you sell it without a star and you only sell it with Adim, that doesn't create a kol. But we see from the second member of Rav that even when you only sell property with Adim and not with a star, that does create a certain kol. The Gemara says there's an obvious chiluk between the second case and the first case. The Gemara says, "Hatam lekuchos inu afsiru nafshayu." Who are we trying to protect in the second case? It's future buyers who are coming to buy property from Ruvain. Those people should do their due diligence. Maybe there wasn't such a big call, but there's clearly some sort of call when he sells his property. And before they go buy fields from Ruvain, they should make sure that there's a safe title on this piece of property. You can't compare that to the first case of where individual sales are happening. They're creating this chaskas gimel shanim. Meanwhile, Ruvain, the prior, the Marakama, he could be in a different neighborhood somewhere. He doesn't necessarily know that other people are selling, fields and things like that. So again, when you sell with Adim, there creates some sort of coal, a little bit of a coal, enough that a future buyer should be on notice to do diligence, but it doesn't do enough of a coal to impact a chaskas gimel shanim. Okay.
You're saying that a star creates greater coal
Clearly, a star creates a greater coal than Adim.
just Adim alone.
Yeah, but
Because the star also has Adim.
presumably, yeah, or it's recorded for some reason that creates. People like to talk about people selling real estate and stuff like that. But if it was only done by Adim, and we'll see, even within Adim, there's going to be levels. But we already kind of saw that. Star creates the biggest coal. Adim creates enough of a coal that should put a future buyer on notice in his diligence period. He should see this. But if you're just a Marakama, you own property somewhere, you might not necessarily hear that a property was sold. Okay, but the point is, what was the memra of Rav? The memra of Rav was, again, let's try to get this case down. You had Reuven sold a field to Shimon with a price. Now someone comes and takes the field away from Shimon. It wasn't Reuven's to sell. Reuven owed someone money. So Shimon is now coming back to Reuven saying, you owe me money. Problem is, in the meantime, Reuven sold all of his remaining fields to other people. So now can Shimon go to all those other people who bought this field after the transaction between Reuven and Shimon and collect that thing? And Rav said that you can, even if you only sold the field with Adim and not with a star. So the Gemara says, "Umi amar Rav hachi." Did Rav really say that without a star you can be gova minchas mishubadim? Vatnan. We have a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah that's later on in this Mitzvah multiple times, I believe. At least it's quoted in the Gemara multiple times. Hamal ves chavera b'shtar. When you lend someone money b'shtar, gov minchas mishubadim. It's dafka if you lend someone money with a star, you can be gova minchas mishubadim. Ha'al yedei Adim gova minchas minechorim. So again, it's dafka if the transaction occurs with a star. That's what gives you the right to now go collect from minchas mishubadim. If it was only done by Adim, you wouldn't have a right to be gova minchas mishubadim. So how can Rav argue on this Mishnah? The Gemara says Chitei Rav Tanu Palik. Sometimes the Gemara will look a lot of this by saying that Rav, even though he was only an Amora, he was like very early Amora, and he was Rav. Sometimes to get out of a jam, the Gemara will say Rav Tanu Palik. The problem is the Rav Shmuel, the Amri Travayu, we have a different memra where we know for sure that Rav and Shmuel both said Malva al Peh. Eno Gova, Lomana Yarshin, Lomana Lakuchos, that if you're a Malva Alpeh, you don't have a star, you cannot collect from Yarshim or from the Lakuchos. You have a Furish Thira within Rav. On the one hand, Rav says that this case on the bottom of Hamad Beis, where you buy property with a Christ, you can be Gova, Minchasim Mishubadim, even without a star. But over here, we have not only a Mishnah, but a member of Rav himself who says that when you lend money without a star, you cannot be Gova, Minchasim Mishubadim. So again,
not from Yarshim.
Well, the Yarshim is a side point. Here we're focusing on the Lakuchos, really. But the Gemara gives another obvious chiluk, right? It's the two cases are comparable. Milva Azvini Karamas, you are asking me a sira from the case of loan to sale. The two cases are totally different. When did Rav say you can't collect from Nechas Mishvadim? That's a loan. Malva Kika Yazif, Pitsenika Yazif. When people need to borrow money, they try to do this quietly. Right? The last thing I need to know is that I'm borrowing. I don't need the world to know that I'm borrowing money. They're going to know that I need cash, and they're going to try to come and buy all my stuff, and my stuff's going to get devalued. That's not what I want. But Zvini, when it comes to a seller selling his property, if I'm selling my property, I want to get the best price imaginable. I want to publicize that I'm selling. So you can't compare the two. In a sale, there creates a coal even without the star. When it comes to a loan where people are generally trying to keep it quieter, you need a star in order to get that coal out. And this is what we were talking about, Eddie, that even within Adim, there's various levels of whether there is a coal, there, less of a coal. Bottom line, okay. Weiter. Tana Rabbanan. Achla ha'av shana, the haben shtaim. Let's say the buyer had it for a year, and then unfortunately he died, and the son yarshed the property. So the father was there for a year, and the son was there for 2 years. Or ha'av shtaim v'haben shana. Or ha'av shana v'haben shana, and then v'halokeach shana. The ben sold it to a lokeach. This is the same halacha that we saw at the bottom of Amud Beis. Harei zu chazaka. That either way they can all contribute into this Chaskas Gimel Shan. The Gemara says, Lameimra, the Lokach Islu Kala. So what you're telling me is that a buyer who buys the field from the son, that creates a call that put the Marakama on notice that someone was in the property. Reminu, I'll ask you a stira. Achla, let's say flip the case. Achla b'fnei ha'av shana u'b'fnei ha'benstein. Let's say the person, it wasn't the buyer that died, but someone bought a property from a father, right? And so he was living on the field, and then the father died. So now he was, the lokach was on the field in front of the father, and then the son for 2 years, or b'fnei ha'benstein, b'fnei ha'avstein, b'fnei ha'benshana, or b'fnei ha'avshana, b'fnei ha'benshana, b'fnei lokach shana. The point is, I bought a piece of property. I'm there for 3 years. I'm the same person, but I bought it from a father. The father then died, so now the son was there, and then the son even sold it to a lokach. But the Gemara says, Harezu chazaka. The Gemara says, wait 1 second. If you're telling me that by a son or by a person selling a property to a lokach, that there's a call for that, so then I don't understand why in the second case should it be a chazaka when the Marakama sold the property to a lokach. Now, shouldn't that create a mecha? That seems like a pretty big mecha. That seems like the Marakama saying, this is my field, not your field. I'm literally selling the field to someone else, right? So we see it inside. If you're going to tell me that an acquisition creates this call in the Chamacha Gedola Mizu, then how in the world are you telling me that the buyer who's been on this field for 3 years, while the field itself is changing hands multiple times, from a father to a son to a lokeach, clearly that's a mecha. That should have put the machzik on the buyer on notice to keep your star, right? If you don't be like, oh, I lost my star, it's been 3 years. The guy's selling the property. Clearly he thinks it's his, right? So Amar of Papa, or Papa says, no, the case is different. Kitanya, that brisa that says that you still have a chazaka is b'mochar sadot of stam. The case isn't talking about where we're dealing with one particular field and the father died and the son sold that field to lokech. Right. Clearly that would put you on notice that that was a macha and you should hang on to your star. The case is a little bit different. Imagine I bought a field from somebody, right? And one field, and I'm living on this field, or I'm living on my house, whatever it is. That person was a very wealthy landowner, and he died, and his entire estate passed down to his son. They have thousands of properties all over the country. And then the son sold the entire portfolio to some big private equity firm, right? None of this impacted, I didn't think any of this impacted me. I heard that he sold his whole portfolio. Meanwhile, one of the exhibits in the portfolio is my house. Someone comes over to me later and says, by the way, did you know that your house was sold? Why would I know that? It's one thing if the entire transaction was centered around my house. So, okay, I would be put on notice that my house just got sold. But if you're telling me that a son sold, 1,000 pieces of property to someone else, how would anyone know that my house was one of those? I just assumed that it was everything else that the father owned, right? And therefore, it's a situation like that where I am not, as a buyer, necessarily put on notice that my property was sold to a lokach. I just assumed it was all of the rest of the estate, whatever he owned at the time, and therefore, I still have a chazkas gimel shana. Okay, weiter. New Mishnah. Again, the concept that we've seen a number of times throughout this parak is that the backbone of the chazkas gimel shanim is that I only have a chazaka to the extent that the ma'arer knew that I was there and didn't make a macha. But if he makes a macha, then obviously I don't have my chazkas gimel shanim, right? I have to hang on to my shtar, which therefore means if there was a reason for the macha person, the ma'arer, to not make a macha, I don't have a chazaka. I mean, both things work in tandem. If there was any reason why he shouldn't have made a macha, i.e. I had a reason to be on his field, then he shouldn't have needed to make a macha. I don't have a chazkas gimel shanim because his lack of making a macha isn't a raya that I had my chazaka. So we'll have a few examples in this Mishnah. Ha'omnin, let's say a person is, some sort of person who works on people's stuff, right? He fixes things for people. So the point is, it would make sense that my object would be in his rishus. He can never say, oh, things in my rishus, I have a chazaka, right? No, it's in your rishus because I literally gave it to you to fix it for me. Hashutbin, people that are partners, right? If we own a field together, it makes sense that you're in my field, right? I can't come to you later and be like, my buys by Ara. What do you mean? Exactly. Va'arisin, va'patrapin, elam chazaka. But again, just to say that a little bit better, right? If I say to someone, my buys by Aaron, he says, what do you mean you sold it to me? And I'll tell you sold it to me because I've been here for 5 years and never said anything. I can always say, that's because we're partners, right? The fact that I didn't say anything doesn't give you a raya that it's yours. We're partners. Of course, I didn't say anything. It's interesting to just note, though, that of the four cases, Umnin, Shutpin, Arisin, and Apotropin, Umnin is the one that doesn't really belong, because the other four are dealing with real estate. Umnin is dealing with metaltalin. So the Rashbam speaks out that Umnin is it's not a cheskas gimel shana. That generally, if I have something in my property, if there's a bike in my garage, I buy it. You don't really ask anything. But if I'm an uman, then the fact that I have a bike in my garage doesn't prove that it's mine. I should always hang on to my star, because someone can easily say, no, that's my bike. I gave it to you to fix, right? So again, it's not quite like the other cases, but either way, back to the Mishnah. These four examples, Umnin, Shutpin, Arisin, Bapatropin, the last three are dealing with real estate, Ein Lehem Chazaka. If they really do buy something from their partner, they should hang on to the star. Next case, Loli Ish Chazaka B'nichse Ishto. A man doesn't have a Chazaka B'nichse Ishto. So the Rashbam says, these are sugars that we'll see later on, not today, that we know that sometimes women can own property, B'nichse Milug. The husband has rights. He has rights to the income. So therefore, again, if the husband truly bought it from his wife, he should hang on to the star, because she would always have a right to say, why would I ever make a macha? Like, you were working the field because you have rights in the field. Same thing in reverse. The wife always has the right to say, I have a right to mizonos. That's what, whatever it was. And therefore, the Baal can say, why would I ever make a macha? It made sense that you'd be in my field. Again, all these cases, there's always a reason for the person to be there, and therefore there's an excuse for the ma'arar to not have made a macha. We're talking about a chaskas gimel shan. But let's say someone truly wants to make a chazaka to affect a kinyan. So let's say someone gave someone a gift, or or people that are dividing an estate, or someone just wants to make a chazaka on hefker. So then you can make a chazaka. It's na'al gadar upar. It's kol shu arezu chazaka. The back half of the Mishnah, which again we're not going to deal with in today's Gemara, is just again one of the forms of kinyan is chazaka, right? It's kesef, shtar, and chazaka. If you want to affect the kinyan of real estate, and all this Mishnah is saying is, when we say ein lem chazaka, we just mean ein lem chazaka like chaskas gimel shanim. But you can still do a chazaka to affect a kinyan in a proper transaction. Again, not today's daf. That will be back to Yoel, unless it comes back to me because I got a late night text. But generally, this will be a future daf. Okay. Something like that. Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry.
that's what.
It could be. Yeah, it's just a different chazaka. I mean, it's not a chazak gimel shanim. It's just a different form of chazaka, right? No, so normally when it comes to metaltalin, it's right away, right? If something's in your rishus, I think the Rashbam even speaks it out. See here, if you look at the Rashbam, in them chazaka below b'chazkas shalosh shana mayri. Either way. Okay. The Gemara says we are mem beis amid beis. Avua, Shmuel, Levi. So Shmuel's father and also Levi. The way they understood this Mishnah was they said Tanu shutaf ein lo chazaka. The chiddush was that the people are partners, like we spoke out when we learned the Mishnah. The people are partners, then you don't necessarily have a chaskas gimel shanim. Because gain uman, meaning it would make sense that partners have a reason to be in the field, and therefore they can't establish a chazaka. And if you're going to say that by partners, then kol shekain, an uman, has a reason to have someone else's property in his rishus, and therefore the uman doesn't have a chazaka from the fact that he has it in his rishus. So he kind of taught both of those cases. But Shmuel himself, that was Abu Shmuel, that was Shmuel's father. Shmuel himself said, uman ein lo chazaka. When it comes to an uman, he can't establish a chazaka by just having something in his property. Aval shutov yesh lo chazaka. But when it comes to partners, partners can establish a chazaka. And just to speak out the case, it's going to be very much the topic of this Amud is imagine a case where you have Reuben and Shimon that are partners, and all of a sudden it's 4 years later, and Shimon's been in the property on his own for 4 years. And Reuben comes and he says, what are you doing on my field? Right? And Shimon says, I bought it from you, and I don't have a star because it was 4 years ago. And Reuben said, well, I never needed to make a macha because we were partners. Shmuel is saying that Shimon has a valid time of like, we were partners 4 years ago, but if we were truly partners, you would have said something for the last 4 years or 3 years. I have been living here all on my own, right? So again, our Mishnah seems to say that they don't have a chazaka. But Shmuel, the way he learned this Mishnah, he must have not had the case of shutbin, because Shmuel says that when it comes to shutbin, it is a raya. If you're on the field all by yourself, that in fact is a raya, and the other guy should have made a mecha. The Gemara says, "But the Shmuel tamei." This Shmuel goes like his reason to Amar Shmuel. This is Shita Shmuel. Shmuel says, "Hashutbin machzikin zalzeh." Again, shutbin have the ability to make a chaskas gimel shanim one on another. If they're really there for 3 years, that they can establish a chazaka. Umi idin zalzeh. It's a different halacha. Again, not really our sugya, but the case would be: imagine if someone comes and a third guy and says, "Hey, you partner A, that's on my field." So can partner B be an aid to back up partner A, right? You might have a havamina that not necessarily. Maybe he's an ogei abadavar, because he might say, listen, I actually prefer to be partners with partner B over this random guy. Mashmal, and then no, they're not ogei abadavar. V'nasim shomrim sachar zel is that. Another halach, again, not our sugya, but imagine 2 different people own a bike, and so half the week it's in your garage and half the week it's in my garage, and then it gets stolen. So how do we view the 2 partners vis-a-vis each other? Are they shomer chinams? And therefore you say, listen, or do you say, no, it's shomer sachar. You watch it and I watch it, and while I'm watching it, that's kind of my payment to you, and when you're watching it, that's kind of your payment to me. Therefore, we're both shomer sachars, and therefore, if it gets stolen, you do owe me for my half. So Shmuel says that partners are shomer sachar zel is that. But what's the point? Shmuel clearly holds that 2 people that are partners, one can be machzik on the other's property if he's there for 3 years, and that is Shmuel going lishitaso. So Rami le Rav Abba le Rav Yehuda, the Ma'arta the Be'er Rav Zakkai. So Rav Abba le Rav Yehuda said in the Ma'ara the Be'er Rav Zakkai. It sounds like this is the crypt of the Be'er Rav Zakkai. So what were they doing in the crypt of the Be'er Rav Zakkai? So I think the Bach, our scroll says this, that the Bach changes the girsa. It's not the Ma'ara or Ma'arta, it's the Ma'atarta, which I think is Nala Press or something along those lines. But the art scroll also quotes someone that says that this was a time when you weren't able to learn, and therefore they needed to like hide, and they literally hid in the crypt and whatever. Ask the Shaila. But the point is that mi Amar Shmuel Shutaf yesh lo chazaka. Is it really true that Shmuel holds that Shutvin can have a chaskas gimel shanim one on the other? But Amar Shmuel Shutaf ki yored b'rshustami. Shmuel says somewhere else that when you're a Shutaf, it's as if you are like an artist. You're someone that came to the other property b'rshus. Lab l'meimra the Shutaf ein lo chazaka. What would that halacha mean if not for the fact that what you're trying to say is that a Shutaf cannot establish a chazaka on someone else's property? So you have a first stira in Shmuel. On the one hand, Shmuel said that partners can establish a chazaka, but here we have another member of Shmuel that says that when you're a shutaf, you're treated as if you're a yored b'rshus, meaning you're like an aris or something like that, and therefore you cannot establish a chazaka. Gemara says, "Lo kasha hadanachas the kula hadanachas the palga." And amri le'lahagisa, but amri le'lahagisa. The chiluk between the 2 cases is, what is this partner doing? Is he being on the entire field for 3 years, or is he just being on one half of the field for 3 years? Meaning, presumably there's 2 halves, and one half is more valuable than the other. So is he just on one half for 3 years? And he's trying to say, I have a chazaka, this is my half. Maybe that would be one thing. Or is he on the entire field and he's saying this entire field is mine? And in a fascinating way, the Gemara says, that's the chiluk between the 2 cases. Which one does he say you can make a chazaka? Which one does he say you can make a chazaka? There was a machlokas of which case was which. So the easier one is to say, listen, if I'm machzik on the entire field, that's where I can establish a chazaka. I'm only machzik on half of the field, even if it's the better half. So the other one could say, fine, you were on the better half for 3 years. Maybe our arrangement would be that I would get the better half for the next 3 years. But other people had it exactly the opposite. It really just depends on how people were partners and what the division of land was. But the other way of looking at it is you can say, if I was machzik on the entire field for 3 years, that it made sense where the other partner would say, that was our arrangement. You would be on the field for 3 years, and then I would be on the field for years 4 through 6. And that's our arrangement. But if you just tried to be on half of the field, the better half of the field, that no one agrees to. Just to be on the better half, we'd say, listen, if we're going to split it, then we'll split the whole thing equally. We're not going to flip-flop sides every 3 years. So again, it just depends. If you work through these responds, it just depends on the arrangement. But the bottom line is that's the chiluk. In one of the cases, Shmuel says that partners can establish a chazaka, and the other case, Shmuel says partners cannot establish a chazaka. Ravina Amar Haba Dinakula. I can give you a different chiluk. Both cases are where partner A took over the entire field for 3 years. The difference would be how big is the field? Is the field at least 8 amos big? If it's not, then by you being on there for the whole field doesn't establish a chazaka, because I can say, listen, our field wasn't big enough for the two of us. So it makes sense that you'd be on it for 3 years and I'll take over the next 3 years. But if it's big enough for us to split, then no one would let their partner be on the whole field for 3 years. That's the difference. Gufa. And with this will end. Amar Shmuel, Shutaf Kyorid Bershus Dami. Shutaf, like we said, can't establish a chazaka. He is like Aris, right? The Gemara says, my Kamash one. What's Shmuel trying to teach us? Shutfas ain't no chazaka. That Shutfas, they can't establish a chazaka. Lema, Shutaf ain't no chazaka. So what are you giving me this riddle of a Shutaf is a Yored Bershus Dami? Just tell me what you want to tell me. Just tell me. Shutaf ain't no chazaka. Amar Nachman, Amar Rabbi Baravua, Lomer, Shenota, Bashvach, Hamagia, Lexafine, Misada, Shehena, Suyalita, Kisada, Suyalita. This is a complicated sugya at the end of Baba Mitzia, but the bottom line is anytime someone just goes into someone else's rishus property, someone goes into someone else's property without rishus, and they make it better. So how much does the property owner owe this random person? Right? So there's a whole sugya, and it depends. If it wasn't a field that was a suyalita, was it a field that wasn't a suyalita? Was he really someone that didn't have rishus, did he have rishus? And it depends. Do you only owe the guy's expenses? Do you also owe how much he valued the property? Do you owe, let's say there was already produce that was basically ready to be harvested. Do you have to pay anything for that? Or do you say, no, that was already done? These are all different sugyas. And what Shmuel is trying to teach you is if you're partners, then you're treated like a Yored Bershus, which has a certain status in that sugya. And therefore you would be paid for shvach. You would be paid for stuff that was ready to be harvested. And that's why Shmuel said this halacha shouldn't. Instead of just saying shutfas eno chazaka, he specifically said a shutf is a yored bershus dami, because again, he was trying to teach us something that has, again, relevance in those other sugyas in Baba Mids. Okay, stop here. The 2 dots all the way at the bottom.